I'm not saying that they left those kids alone in that hotel room, but I do think there are some red flags here. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. And today we're talking about Matt and Abby because actually Aaron and I have talked about them on the podcast before, briefly, and I've been meaning to make a deep dive about them and their content because there's a lot going on over there. There's been, Matt specifically has been the subject of a lot of videos about like the worst husband on YouTube, which is just like it's really a lot. So I've been meaning to talk about them, but we are talking about their most recent controversy today because it was like a parenting issue. We're going to go over the details of that, but essentially they're under allegations right now that they left their children alone, unattended in their hotel rooms, staterooms, while they were on a cruise, which is obviously horrifying. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about some of their other parenting decisions that are questionable. And just hopefully do some educating about like best practices in terms of parenting and all of that stuff. So that said, let's get into the video. Oh, also, hi, if you're new, thanks for coming. You can subscribe if you click the button down there. Bumping that, bumping that, bumping that, bumping that. As a brief explanation, Matt and Abby are a couple. They are also actually high school sweethearts, and they also live in Phoenix. There's a lot of shocking commonality happening there, but they are a couple that makes primarily like lifestyle and couple, sometimes parenting content on their YouTube channel. They also have a podcast that is called Unplanned. A lot of their content revolves around the like parenting 2 under 2 thing because Abby was unexpectedly pregnant, I think like 5 months postpartum after their first child. So I will give them credit for the fact that they don't include their sons in their content. Like you never see their kids' faces, and the content rarely revolves around their actual kids so much as it does around their lives as parents. And they do a lot of like challenge-based content, and like they initially kind of popped off on TikTok and Reels and short form content by doing cutesy little dance challenges and things like that. So they have been outspoken about waiting until they were married to have sex with one another. So it's unclear if they are religious like that or not, but they do kind of associate with a lot of other religious people. They interviewed Jill Duggar on their podcast, for example, and Ginger Duggar, a bunch of other religious people. So it's sort of up in the air, like it's a maybe from me, but their content isn't necessarily like explicitly religious. So in case you're not familiar, that's kind of a primer on like what they do on the internet. But they came under fire recently because Abby posted on her Instagram story while they were on a cruise that they set up their baby monitors in such a way that their phone was FaceTiming the baby monitor, because I guess the monitors didn't work if you were more than like 10 feet away from them while they were on board. So they FaceTimed the baby monitor so that they could go and get dinner and like have an adult dinner by themselves without having to bring their boys with them. A lot of people were really freaked out by this because they made it sound, I'll show you guys a screenshot so you can see it, but they made it sound like they were FaceTiming the baby monitor so that they could leave the kids alone, which is obviously fucking terrifying. I want to be clear, we're going to get into the problems with that. But people were really freaked out by this, and so Abby deleted it a few hours later, which made the whole thing so much fucking worse. So a lot of allegations were swirling. To be fair, they have come out and publicly said that that was not the case, that there was an adult watching their child or their children at all times, and that the kids were never left alone. They didn't FaceTime their baby monitors to leave them alone, but rather because they just wanted to have eyes on their kids. I don't know. It's an eyebrow raise from me. Okay, before we go any further, though, I want to talk to you about this week's sponsor, which is Adam and Eve. We've worked with them before, and I am delighted to work with them again. Adam and Eve has actually been around for over 50 years, honestly, and it shows. The company has discreet shipping and 90-day no-hassle returns, which we love, and also 20% of their profit goes to fighting the spread of HIV around the world, so we love that. And if you go to adamandeve.com and you use code Mickey, you can get 50% off of one item plus free shipping in the US and Canada. So go click that link and use code Mickey to get 50% off in the US and Canada. Show them some love for showing me some love. Thank you, Adam and Eve, for sponsoring this week's video. Let's go ahead and hop back in. For what it's worth, though, it's not like we can really prove or disprove that, so we're just going to run with what they're saying in an effort to give them the benefit of the doubt. To be clear, I do want to talk about some of the potential risks of this, though, because I've seen a surprising amount of people say, like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. If they did that, like, who cares? I've seen a lot of people comparing it to leaving your kid in their bedroom and like being in your kitchen in your house, that like it's really not all that different. And like it is. It's very different. There's a lot of, I think, scary things that could happen to your kid if you leave them unattended like this, not the least of which are like choking or aspirating or your child's not breathing while they're sleeping. Your kid could start running a fever. There's all kinds of like adverse health things if those start while you're away from your child. I think it's also worth noting as well, I've seen a lot of people make comparisons to Madeleine McCann, which does feel a little bit like fair, but also kind of worst case scenario. But to be fair, I think 90% of the time, nothing bad is really going to happen. But that 10% of the time is the thing that is worth preventing. And that's why we have best practice parenting practices that we put in place, right? There is very much a concern and an issue with that. I have seen some people say that like, well, they're on a cruise, right? They're on a boat. And so it's not like anyone can really leave necessarily, which I don't know that I really agree with that, to be quite frank. But besides that, I do want to be clear that in best case scenario, right? If somebody who is like not ill-intentioned, like housekeeping or maintenance, walked into the room while those kids were unattended, that's traumatizing and scary and like unfortunate for everyone involved. But in a worst case scenario, if somebody who is ill-intentioned was able to access those children, there's a whole world of scary and terrible things that can happen. And so like, this is why we don't leave kids alone. I also want to point out here that Matt and Abby are influencers. They have a very large following. And actually there were, it seems, people who identified them or like knew who they were on the cruise with them. Like somebody who was a follower of theirs posted something about them on social media. And so especially advertising, broadcasting to the world that you've left your child either unattended, actually, or seemingly unattended is a terribly and scary, irresponsible thing to do, especially because, again, even best case scenario, if that person is like, you know, well-intentioned, showing up to your room and knocking on the door or trying to get your attention or something like that is scary, especially if that person were ill-intentioned. There's all kinds of terrible and scary things that can happen. On top of that, there's also the risk for things like a fire or flooding or like other kinds of issues like structural issues or whatever. Obviously, they're also on a boat, right? And like cruise ships, generally speaking, are pretty safe, but it's not unheard of for those vessels to have issues. And so there's like lots of issues that could arise here with leaving your kids alone. And the thing about this that is especially scary and what has provoked a lot of people's ire is that in the event that they needed to get back to their kids, it's going to take them at least 5 minutes, if not longer, probably longer, honestly. Don't get me wrong. I've never been on a cruise. I refuse to be on a cruise. But from my understanding, the like separating or the separation between like where you actually stay and like the formal dining room and all of that can sometimes require an elevator ride, which can definitely take a long time. But even if you're just like running from one side of the ship to the other or like down a short hallway or whatever, that distance is sometimes going to take too long in the event of an emergency. And so again, this is why we have babysitters, right? This is why we don't leave young children alone. I also forgot to clarify at the top that their children are 1 year old and 2 years old. So there's no world where those kids are old enough to be left alone. Again, there's all kinds of scary things that could have happened if those kids were indeed alone. And like, again, we're going to take them at their word because there's really not anything else we can do. But for the sake of educating, never do this, right? It doesn't matter if you feel like you're close enough or if you're able to FaceTime a baby monitor or take the baby monitor with you. Don't fucking do this. There's no world where it's appropriate or safe to leave small kids like this alone because, again, all kinds of awful things can happen. I also wanted to make a brief PSA here as well that even in the case of not a like worst case scenario, right, leaving kids unattended to cry and cry and cry before you can get to them can still be damaging to them. In a psychological sense, there's a phenomenon called the excitation relaxation or arousal relaxation cycle that essentially refers to a caregiver's ability to effectively meet their child's needs. And what this means is that like babies obviously can't communicate with us. And so the way that they do that is by crying. So it's common for people who are caregivers of small children or babies to say like, oh, that cry means that they're hungry or that cry means that they need their diaper changed, right? And that kind of communication is really necessary in order to form that like solid and safe bond, first of all, but also for that child to later go on and form a sense of safety and like healthy attachment in their relationship with their primary caregiver and then in relationships with others. We've talked about it on the channel before. It's, I think, one of the most important parts of child rearing, which is being a safe and predictable person for your child. And so even, again, in something that's not the worst case scenario, like a disaster or an emergency, simply leaving your child alone to like wake up and be scared because they're alone or don't know where you are, or to have to wait 5 to 10 minutes to get their needs met by you is not appropriate. Like, you can legitimately damage your child's sense of attachment and like their psyche, especially if you do this repeatedly. If you're not doing your due diligence to meet their needs over and over again, you can very much harm your child psychologically and mentally. Again, regardless of all of the aforementioned risks, Matt and Abby did like pretty seriously refute the allegations that they left their children alone. And to be fair, they do actually have some like good parenting takes. I was pretty surprised. I scrubbed through a good amount of their content and was actually really encouraged to find some content about like not yelling at your kid. Well, I mean, the bar this in hell, but still, about not yelling at your kids, and them stating that they don't agree with corporal punishment or spanking, and them talking about like respect and modeling appropriate behavior with your kids. I'll put some of those videos up on the screen now.
As soon as you yell or appear out of control, you lose all respect and like trust with your children.
Every parent makes mistakes.
Exactly.
But if you constantly yell at your child, maybe they're not going to want to keep a relationship with you once they're older. And that's really sad.
If you lose your cool and you yell at your kid, take a breath, say, oh, mom needs a minute. And then model that for your kids when you need to kind of collect yourself. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards say, hey, mom yelled and she shouldn't have done that. Yeah. It's not okay to yell at other people. It's not okay to like take out your anger like that.
I don't even have to force Griffin to eat his vegetables because I'll eat vegetables next to him. And then he thinks it's cool because he's like, oh, I want to be like dad and eat peas.
Exactly.
That's the way to do it.
You can't force him. I don't think you should force them to eat it. You can't force them to eat anything.
You got to
But you can model it, and you can talk about the advantages of vegetables. Always offer it, put it on their plate. Like, you know how little kids' plates have like sections? I would always put a vegetable on there. And you could also talk about how they're good for their bodies and how they're rich in fiber, which our body needs. I'm the only one that's given our kid a timeout, though.
No, I've done stuff like that before.
Did you call it a timeout?
I have not officially given him a timeout.
I've officially given him 2 timeouts.
Oh, okay.
And really, he wasn't even upset about it. He just needed to calm down. He gets so worked up, and I think it's because he has your energy.
I bet you our kids have ADHD like me.
I would not be surprised at this point either, but maybe he's just a normal toddler, honestly. He gets so sweaty, his face gets red, he cannot slow down his body. Yeah. And I'm like, you're a danger to yourself and others, so you're going to be by yourself for 1 minute. It's literally just 1 minute.
So that said, they're far from the worst parents that we've ever talked about on the channel. Leighton Sutton looking at you. So I do want to be clear about that. And I think there's some other stuff that I want to go over in regards to their parenting missteps while we're talking about this whole incident, because there is a good amount of like, I don't know, deep dive, I think, that's helpful to talk about. So first and foremost, I want to talk about the unequal division of labor. I want to be clear, this is not a Matt and Abby exclusive issue. We have talked ad nauseum on this channel about how this happens a lot in cishet relationships, particularly between men and women who get married really young, which Matt and Abby very much fit that demographic. It happens a lot where, especially in like very gendered expectations and in religious environments, the expectation is that the mom, the woman, does the majority of the cooking and the cleaning and the child rearing and the logistics managing and like all of this mental load stuff that ends up being really fatiguing and really exhausting. And the man's job is to like provide, like make money, I guess. Matt and Abby have come under fire for some strange choices that they've made in terms of their content. Matt made this video outlining this whole like surprise that he was doing, trying to like do a nice thing for Abby while she was at the gym, I guess. And it was essentially like putting dishes in the dishwasher and like feeding their baby and things that were just like really not impressive or like reaching for the stars whatsoever, and was like really upset. Matt and Abby both were really upset when the internet was like, hello? To be fair, it does seem like there's some context around this in the sense that Matt was annoyed because some people, I guess, had criticized Abby for like not doing enough. So he made this video talking about how like, you know, I'm surprising her and doing all this stuff and like, don't be fooled. My wife normally does all of this. And I guess it was supposed to be a jab at those people who said that Abby didn't do anything. It didn't really come across clearly. And so to me, I feel like this is kind of the thing where like if somebody writes a piece of satire and it's not obvious that it's satire, then like you did it wrong. You did a bad job. And so like try again. Regardless of that, there is also examples of this in their content besides just this one video. For example, the birthday, Father's Day debacle. Aaron and I talked about this on the pod. To summarize, Matt was really upset that last year, or at the time that they filmed it, the previous Father's Day landed on his actual birthday and the days ended up getting combined. He literally says to Abby, or Abby says in a kind of joking way, it seems like, oh, I failed you by combining the holidays. And Matt is like, yeah, it's okay. You'll do better next time though, which is just it's a gross expectation and like it's a strange hill to die on, I think. It does really come across as a person who is fixated on centering himself in the lives of him and his family and just seems to have trouble letting go of this like very childlike fixation with like, somebody clap for me, like everybody celebrate me, even as an adult and a father. He's not able to sort of let go of that and is like insistent that it's Abby's job to celebrate him and orchestrate this whole thing, and especially to separate those things so that he can have 2 separate days where Abby does all of this heavy lifting, literally and figuratively, to make Matt feel special. They literally said on that podcast episode that they were boycotting Father's Day and celebrating it 3 months after his birthday. So again, just kind of rancid vibes there. And again, this sort of de facto expectation that it's just Abby's job to like make Matt smile, which is gross. And again, very much a byproduct of this patriarchal attitude. One of the other things that comes to mind in this regard is a TikTok that they made that Matt made. That's also another thing at the center of this issue, is that Matt seems to be like the content creation guy. Matt seems to be the one who has a fixation with being famous and wanting attention. He also makes music. We're going to talk about that later. So Matt seems to be the one kind of driving the content creation train. Abby has openly admitted that if she wasn't getting paid for content creation, she wouldn't do it. She doesn't like it. She doesn't use social media apps on her own phone. She's not really a consumer of content because she really just does not like it. There's also been moments where she has said definitively, like, I do not want to vlog like the births of our children, for example. Vlogged the births of their kids. So there's really some questionable stuff going on in regards to Matt seeming to be the one who's like, more content, more content. Regardless, there was a TikTok that Matt made talking about their experience with their second child, I believe, immediately postpartum in the hospital. First of all, where he said that she cheated at birth by getting a C-section, which is crazy. I've never heard anybody refer to major abdominal surgery as cheating, but that's neither here nor there. That video, the subject or the center of that seemed to be that like it was really testing their marriage to be in this hospital room for 48 hours and having to deal with newborn care and breastfeeding versus bottle feeding and all of this stuff. Again, Matt seeming to really center himself in this equation where like your wife just survived, again, intensive major abdominal surgery and simultaneously birthing a child. Her body's changing. Her hormones are raging. There's also probably a good amount of fear and maybe grief about not getting to have the birth that she was hoping for, it seems. And your concern is about like not getting to sleep in your own bed, not getting to shower. Like it's just a very strange attitude. Again, it just seems to kind of demonstrate this insistence that it's Abby's job to sort of coddle and like, spoon feed Matt so that he never has to be uncomfortable. And also it's her job to manage the caregiving and the cleaning and you get it. So, okay. So I think the question for a lot of people is like, why are we talking about this? Because it seems like that's more marital stuff than it is parenting stuff. And I have a tie-in. We talked about this in a video that we made about emotionally immature parents. I'll put that up here. That video we talked about sometimes a byproduct of having emotionally immature parents is that they feel the need to center themselves in everything all the time, every day. This seems kind of that. Again, we talked about Matt and Abby being high school sweethearts and getting married really young. I'm not accusing them of being emotionally immature. I want to be clear. And also I want to identify the commonalities there, that it's like very possible for that to happen to people, especially being thrust into parenthood very young. It's likely that there's just less space and less time and less emotional availability to be doing things like unlearning childhood trauma and doing deep work on ourselves and our identity. And it's not to say that that makes you a bad person. And also, again, I just want to identify that there is a higher likelihood in that scenario that someone might become an emotionally immature parent. And that is correlated with negative outcomes, both in your own life, but especially in your children's life. Being this parent who feels the need to be like, everybody clap, everybody applaud for me, can cause you to become somebody who eclipses your child and like feels threatened by them having the spotlight or by your child succeeding. It can also become an issue, though, in parents trying to live vicariously through their kids. The stereotype dad who like needs his son to be a football player, like this is very much that attitude also. It can also become an issue with a parent feeling as though their child's success is because of the parent and needing everyone to applaud and like, wow, you're such a good parent. What would your kids do without you? All of which is unhealthy. All of which can cause your child to have self-esteem deficits, self-efficacy deficits, to have relational issues. We talked earlier about poor attachment and how that can manifest in your adult relationships. This is very much that vibe here as well. This can be a person who struggles to be boundaried and to have a healthy separation between themselves and others, and especially somebody who struggles to ask for what they need from relationships because they're used to a parent just like steamrolling right over top of them. So I want to talk about this again in the effort of hoping to educate people that this behavior, while we can identify that it is human and it happens because of circumstances that are sometimes out of our control, it is still problematic. This is very much something that we want to unlearn and hopefully move away from, either through therapy or through any other means or resources that are available to you. Because again, the negative outcomes that are associated with this, as far as like your children are concerned, can really, like I'm not being dramatic, it can really be life-changing for them. Listen, there are some other things. There's some little one-offs. I thought about including them in this video. To me, they feel like small potatoes. I don't necessarily want to go through and like end this man's whole career. Like I'm not interested in picking these people apart, especially in a moment where they're probably already being picked apart. And I want to talk about this last thing because to me, this is kind of the biggin. This is the thing that sticks out most obviously across all of their content, which is that there seems to be either like a pretty heavy resentment towards their kids or towards like the burden of parenting generally, or like maybe just like a grief or like unprocessed emotion in regards to how difficult parenting actually is. And there's something about coffee that used to be hot that is now cold. It's like weirdly nostalgic. Matt and Abby seem like they definitely potentially have been victim to this societal messaging about how, you know, being a parent is so fun and kids are so cute and like, look at this tiny onesie and parenting is all fun and you know, like gender reveal parties and baby showers and like kids. It's all so fun, right? And then the cold hard reality of how difficult parenting actually fucking is, it sort of like smacks you really intensely, really profoundly once you're like in the shit and it's too late. And we've talked a lot in this video about them being young parents, being like married young. That's all kind of prime demographics for people to have made these really permanent and life-changing decisions while they're really young. I mean, like notably Matt and Abby, I'm pretty sure gave birth, or Abby at least gave birth to her first child before her frontal lobe had fully formed. So like that really, I think, paints us a picture about where these people were at in their lives. A lot of us are not really done with our self-identity work and figuring out who we are and where we fit into the world. And so to have a child before that happens can be really challenging from an identity and like self-efficacy place. And especially knowing that they may or may not be religious or that they are like potentially culturally affected by that, you know, cultural value. It often happens to those people in those communities, that the positive aspects of parenting are highlighted and nobody talks about the negative aspects or the difficult aspects. And I want to be clear, as a child-free person, I get called like a baby hater and I'm like an anti-natalist all the time, and that's not true. I want to be super clear. I'm not a child-free person because I hate kids. I actually really love kids. It was a really difficult decision actually for Aaron and I to decide not to have kids, and it wasn't because we fucking hate kids' guts. It's for a lot of reasons. One of which, though, was that Aaron and I both had a lot of concerns about our ability to prioritize what felt most important in our lives, which to us is our career and our community and like those goals, those life goals, while also being a present parent to children. I personally don't think I have the capability to do both. And so I'm choosing me. Like I chose me. We chose ourselves and the goals that feel important to us now, as opposed to choosing hypothetical children that don't exist yet. And so this is kind of at the center of what I want to talk about here. A lot of people don't really accurately or honestly discuss how difficult it is to be a parent, especially when children are young, because this environment really, again, doesn't suit itself to deep introspection about your identity and doing a lot of work on yourself and doing these like more self-focused things, because young children are very, very labor intensive. And it's not to say that kids are a burden or bad, but being a parent can be burdensome sometimes. And I think it's fair and okay to admit that. That doesn't make someone ungrateful for their kids also. It doesn't make someone a child hater to acknowledge that being a parent to young children is plain and simple, it's just really fucking hard. There seems to be a lot of emotions happening for Matt and Abby, potentially some push and pull, some confusion and inner conflict about like the joys of parenthood, while also feeling this sense of grief or loss around their lives previous to having kids. This comes out in their content a lot. Most notably, I think, is a clip. I'm going to show it to you. I'll show it to you now.
You know how I was like really quiet the first day after the birth?
Yeah.
I think like, look, I don't get like emotional like you, but I think that was like my version of baby blues in a way.
Yeah.
Which I feel like I still don't quite understand what the term baby blues means, but I think I was...
You'll never understand, honey.
I won't. And I won't understand from your perspective. But I think I was having this like realization moment of, okay, like my life just changed big time. And for a little bit, I was like, wow, like all my career goals have to go to the wayside. And I just kind of felt, I was kind of frustrated a little bit.
I could tell.
And I just kind of shut down and didn't say anything. Like I was just like quiet.
Yeah, that was hard for me.
Because I wasn't going to like talk to you about it because I didn't want to like bring you down. But then by me not saying anything, I think that brought you down.
Well, you were bringing me down because you weren't talking to me. It was just hard because I was having such high needs at that point that weren't getting met. And I think it was causing frustration between the two of us.
And it was hard too because like for me, knowing that you can't, other than obviously you need to feed Augie and, you know, we can't do formula, but like you were, you know, wanting to do breastfeeding. And so like, it felt like I was doing like everything for Augie. And so I'm like, here I am, like, I have all these like big goals and big dreams and I have to put them to the wayside, and I'm like, I'm stuck here. And I was kind of mad.
Essentially what happened is that Matt seemed to have like a little bit of a mentee bee after the birth of their first child, which I want to normalize. This is a mental health channel, so like we're not the people to look down on anybody for having a mentee bee, right? Like it happens. I think it happens to everyone at some point in their life. And also this seeming breakdown in communication between the two of them is worrisome in and of itself. But also, again, like this sudden realization about the way that his life had forever and like irrevocably changed speaks volumes to me. It's worrisome and it's not good to see someone have this realization after a child is already born, right? Ideally, we're realizing before we've even chosen to attempt to undertake becoming a parent that like, oh, my life will change forever and my career goals, my hopes, my dreams, those are going to be put on hold or going to be like thrown out the window altogether because now my primary responsibility and, you know, like goal in life is to be a parent. That's the way that parenting should be. Kids are labor intensive and it should require, you should be willing to give them your full attention in order to be a good parent. But for him to have this realization after the thing has already been thinged is not great, right? And especially for him to ignore his wife and stonewall her for 2 days, that's also not good. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is a video that they uploaded to their channel called the 36 hours the solo parenting challenge. Essentially what it was is that Abby was like solo parenting for 36 hours. And they set it up in this very like Mr. Beast style way where there's like my objectives, and like all this kind of like secret agent sort of vibes. Besides the fact that this is painfully tone deaf because this is a whole lot of people's fucking everyday lives, it also, I think, speaks to the fact that these two seem to view parenting almost in like it's a part in a play. There's like a strange sense of like putting on a mask or like pretending to be parents, like kids playing house. There's a strange energy of children playing house here that's not great. Again, when we talk about people who have really fully integrated this idea that they're a parent, actually Matt and Abby have spoken openly on their podcast that they didn't really resonate with the labels of like mom and dad until I think their second child was born. So like, again, really not great in terms of seeing outwardly a person who has really integrated this idea of being a parent and like that is really where you are in your life as opposed to viewing it in this almost like caricature type way. The other thing about the solo parenting challenge that I want to address really quick before we move on is again that we're making this big show out of like how cumbersome and labor intensive and difficult all of this is. It kind of gives this air of like fuck this shit. I don't want to do this. And I'm not saying that they meant it that way, but it is, again, just sort of making a show out of how difficult parenting is, as if this were a surprise to them. That's kind of the point. What I'm getting at here is that being a surprise to them is not a great sign. There are also bits and pieces of this in the music that Matt makes. And listen, I want to be clear. A lot of people came for this man about his music lyrics being passive aggressive to his wife. Personally, it didn't read that way to me. I'm not saying that that's not what it is. I just want to be clear that I think in their specific vernacular, and I've watched a lot of their podcast episodes now, I don't necessarily think that they're being shitty to each other. I do think that it seems to be a product of, again, this like emotional immaturity and like maybe not really realizing the way that you're saying something affecting your partner, or how, like, you know, I mean, we've all, I think, kind of done that where we put our foot in our mouth and we're like, oops, I didn't mean to say this thing that accidentally reflected on you in a way that seems like I'm judging you. I was just kind of saying a thing and then like, oops, it happened, right? And I think that's kind of how a lot of his music lyrics come off. There is a song in particular, though, that I want to talk about, which is called It's Not Enough, I think. I didn't write it down, but I will show you a screenshot of the lyrics right now. You are not going to catch me slipping. This man's not going to copyright claim me. So I'm not going to play you the song, but the lyrics, actually, you know what? I'll read them to you. The song is called Still Not Enough. I'm not going to read you all of the song lyrics. The ones that I think are relevant are this section here where it says, I thought by now I'd be happier. I thought by now I'd have it all figured out. You'd think I'd feel a little better about myself because I got everything I want, but it's still not enough. I'm wondering if I'm depressed. It can't be right. It don't make sense. I'm no doctor, but that's not like me. I put a smile on my face and play the part to hide the pain because there's a couple kids in the back seat. So listen, I want to be clear that this is a mental health channel. And so the last thing that we're going to do is shame this man for expressing openly and like without shame feelings of sadness and depression, because I think that's a really healthy thing to do. I want to be super clear about that up front, that I actually was encouraged to see that someone was talking about how you can simultaneously have this sense of joy or this feeling of like, I do have the things that I wanted, and also depression is sort of stealing my joy, right? To me, that seems like what the sentiment of the song was. And also there is kind of a tinge of like, I didn't realize it would be this hard, right? In a lot of the content that Matt and Abby make, it seems like we get these little glimpses behind the curtain about the grief and the loss that both of these people are experiencing. Again, potentially because there's emotional immaturity happening, or potentially because they just didn't realize that parenting and this life that a lot of us are pushed to want, right? The sort of like fall in love, move in, get married, have a baby, and like, congratulations, you did it, right? Like the big house with the picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the golden retriever thing, right? Like a lot of us are pushed to want that, except that some of us then realize, like myself, like, I don't like that. Actually, that's not really what I wanted. But when you've made permanent life choices when you're really young, before you maybe had the opportunity to figure that out, there can be a grief there, right? Or maybe that is what they genuinely wanted. It just happened maybe faster than they were prepared for it to happen. I think it's very normal for people to have a sense of grief about this. On top of that, their Instagram posts, their Instagram stories while they were on the cruise, also heavy resentment. I'll show you them. I'll put the screenshots up on the screen, or I'll have Aaron do it. The screenshots of their Instagram stories really paint a picture of people who are just at their wits' end, and also are kind of angry, it seems. I don't know if it's directly angry at their children so much as it is just like maybe angry at the circumstances. I don't know. Seems like they're kind of fucking angry at their kids, which was an ick to me. This attitude of like, fuck these fucking kids because I just want to go have dinner by myself, or I want to go do these things, or this cruise wasn't as fun as we thought it would be. And like, listen, I want to validate that like, parenting can put you in a place where you're just at your wit's end and you're like, you know what, I'm fucking irritated. And that's very valid. I'm not trying to shame anybody necessarily, but I do want to talk about this. All of this serves, hopefully, to paint a picture about the resentment that can happen in parenting, especially when we're not doing it in community. It seems like Matt and Abby are, to be clear. They also have a fuckload of money. So like, you help yourself. use the resources at your fucking disposal. But especially for people who don't have the resources or don't have that community to help and uplift them, this resentment can turn into like, I don't want to fucking babysit my kids. I don't want to fucking take my kids to dinner with me right now. I just want to have one fucking dinner alone where I can feel like a goddamn grown-up, right? And not have to deal with a kid crying or needing to go on a walk or having to take them somewhere, or having them freak out, or they don't like the food, whatever, right? Like, I understand and want to validate that feeling. And also, it's very, very important that we be clear about how dangerous this is, right? Both for parents and for children. We talked earlier about Matt expressing a fear about depression or mental illness, right? This is very much a byproduct of those emotions going unprocessed and unaddressed. But there is also a danger for people to do things like neglecting your fucking kids. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that they left those kids alone in that hotel room, but I do think there are some red flags here, right? Of parents who are feeling like worn out and at their wits' end. And while I'm not trying to demonize parents feeling worn out and at their wits' end, it is very important that we have a conversation about what appropriate care looks like, both for parents and for children, when we're reaching the end of our rope, right? Not like in a literal sense, but in a like, maybe I'm just worn out today kind of sense, or like it's been a really hard week kind of sense. This is also why I wanted to make this video, because I think it's really important to have this conversation and like externalize a lot of this dialogue, because the societal rhetoric around parenting is very much one of like, parenting is the best job that you'll ever have. Parenting is so fun. You're going to love it. Don't worry, mama. It's all going to get better. And like, stop that. It's okay for people to acknowledge that parenting fucking blows sometimes. Like, I think that's very important. Erin and I, in the prep for this video, were just talking about our own journey and like deciding not to be parents. And I was just reflecting on like our own life. For those of you that don't know, we are in the process of recovering our senior dog from having orthopedic surgery. And it's been very fucking eye-opening. It's been very eye-opening about how fucking difficult it is and how frustrating it is to feel like your life is not your own, right? There was a situation earlier this year where Erin and I we had a vacation planned. It was paid for. It was booked. We were doing the thing. And then she had like a moderate injury, to be fair. That was not the injury that she really broke her leg, but she had a moderate injury. And he and I both had to make the decision that like, if we can't find somebody who is qualified and safe and willing to care for her in the way that I want her to be cared for, in the way that she needs to be cared for, then our vacation's fucking canceled. Like, it just is what it is. And as heartbreaking as it is to like lose the money on all of the unrefundable or non-refundable deposits, and also not get to go on vacation and like take some of our time back after COVID stole a lot of it, like, it is what it is. It's just the way that it is. And ultimately, in order to be a good caregiver for this being that I love more than I thought I could ever love anybody, that's just the way that it has to work, right? And so this is why I think it's really important to externalize this conversation about parenting, because while a lot of it is going to be filled with joy and it's going to be really fun, and there are parts of it that are just mind-blowing with how much you love this small being. I don't want to like say that doesn't happen. But I think we should also be hosting a societal conversation about how sometimes people are overwhelmed, people are I don't know, fatigued and emotionally drained, and we need to be open to people expressing this and talking about that. Because when we don't, and when we push people in a corner, especially in these like fundamentalist environments, and we tell them like, being upset about it makes you a bad parent, then sometimes they do shit like this, where they neglect their kids, or they treat their kids like shit, or they develop these really harmful ways to cope where they lash out at their kids. And that's not helpful for anyone, but least of all the children who can't defend themselves, who can't leave, and they oftentimes can't tell anyone about it, especially when they're being homeschooled or if they're too young to be leaving the house. There's all kinds of terribly dangerous things that can happen when we're not providing people with an outlet to talk about this, and we're also not holding people accountable for helping themselves when they need the help. I do want to be clear, because I know that on this channel in the past, we've been very hard on people who are, especially people who are fundamentalists and things like that. And I want to be clear, there is a part of me that kind of feels for Matt and Abby, especially because I scrubbed through a lot of their content to make this video. It's clear that their life just happened really fast. I don't know to what degree they're rage baiting people. It's entirely possible that that's what this is. I was really shocked to see that they have so many good takes about parenting. There's a lot of things that they've said that I genuinely agree with and that are actually best practice in regards to parenting from what we know about, like, scientifically, how attachment is formed and how the human development process takes place. So there is a part of me that feels like maybe we're rage baiting and we're making these things up to get clicks and views. I wouldn't be surprised by that. And there is also a part of me that kind of feels for them, again, because I think it's clear that their life happened really quickly. And also, I do want to be very clear that even while we can empathize with and validate exhaustion and overwhelm are never a good enough reason to neglect your fucking kids. Exhaustion and overwhelm are never an okay excuse to say, fuck it all, right? Like that's not ever going to be a thing that is, allowed, but especially that we're going to like co-sign on this channel. I very much disagree with giving people an out and saying like, oh, it's fine. Like, no, it's not fine. It's not fucking fine. In this scenario, though, I want to be clear that the reason that I'm not throwing the book at Matt and Abby is because we have no concrete evidence that they did in fact neglect their children. They have said publicly that they refute these allegations. And quite frankly, there's no proof that they did. A lot of the times we're really, intense with people who are bad parents like Nate and Sutton, because they openly admit to fucking abusing their kids on the internet. And that's where a lot of that energy comes from. Matt and Abby have never done that. And if anything, they've done the opposite of that. So I want to be clear, I'm not fucking fans of Matt and Abby because there's a lot of other problematic things that they've done. And also, I don't necessarily want to throw the book at people who, first of all, have not openly admitted or demonstrated any, proof of abuse or neglect, and who seem to be doing sometimes actually good things in regards to parenting. So I don't know, it's kind of a wash. That said, if you're a parent or you know people who are parents, I do very much want to encourage you to be part of hosting this conversation publicly and acknowledging, especially for moms, because there's this societal message. Actually, you know what, for any parent, really, I do very much want to encourage people to give space for people to talk about how difficult parenting is, because it is, right? It doesn't matter what your gender or societal programming is. The reality is that caring for a small human being is really a lot of fucking work. And the truth is that when we make that conversation acceptable and we provide people with resources or we hold them accountable for helping themselves, that correlates with positive outcomes for children. So I know we talk about this a lot on the channel, but I also want to encourage you to talk to your people, be checked in with your community, ask for what you need in your relationships. Also, that doesn't make you needy, doesn't make you mean. You're allowed to say, hello, hi, I'm struggling. Even if you don't have kids, doesn't matter what your parenting status is in this late stage capitalist dystopian nightmare. We are all in need of care. So ask for what you need. And if you are a parent, just know it is okay to grieve the life that you had before you had kids. It doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't make you shitty. So if you like the video, you can like the video. We do make stuff like this, and we also do a pop culture moment, educational thing that I'd love to have you stay for. And then you can share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.